Dr. Eleanor Frost had seen her fair share of battlefield trauma during her 10 years with Earth's Medical Corps. But nothing had prepared her for the sight of an alien vessel charging weapons directly at her medical ship. "They're doing what now?" she asked, squinting at the holographic display. The sleek, iridescent Veridian ship glowed an ominous purple as it locked weapons on the EMCS Hippocrates. Lieutenant Jenkins, her communications officer, swallowed hard. "They're targeting us, Doctor. Do they not see the giant red cross plastered across our hull? It's literally the size of Texas." Ellie gestured wildly toward the view screen. "We're flying the Universal Medical Insignia. We're a hospital ship, for crying out loud." "I've transmitted our credentials 17 times, Jenkins replied, his fingers flying across the interface. "They're not responding." Ellie raked a hand through her short auburn hair. "Fantastic. Our first contact with an advanced alien civilization, and they can't identify a damn ambulance." The ship's AI chimed in with artificial serenity. "Dr. Frost, I feel obligated to inform you that Veridian energy signatures suggest weapons charging to maximum capacity." "Thank you, Medica. That's extremely helpful," Ellie replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Can we contact Earth Command?" Jenkins shook his head. "Comms are jammed." Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, her second in command, burst onto the bridge. "Ellie, we have 300 patients in cryostasis and another 50 prepped for surgery. Please tell me we're not about to get blown to pieces." "Well, Miguel, I'd love to reassure you, but apparently our new alien friends think the universal symbol for we heal people translates to please shoot us with everything you've got." The ship shuddered as the first volley of alien weapons fire grazed their shields. "All personnel to emergency stations," Ellie commanded, suddenly all business. "Jenkins, keep transmitting our medical status. Rodriguez, start evacuating patients to the escape pods. Medica, activate Protocol Sanctuary." Dr. Medica replied, "Protocol Sanctuary will drain 87% of our remaining power. And being blown up will drain 100% of our remaining lives," Ellie snapped. "Know it. Pry that." Alarms blared throughout the ship as medical staff rushed to secure patients. Ellie had trained them rigorously for this scenario, though she'd never actually expected to use the protocols. Not on a clearly marked medical vessel. Through the view screen, she watched as the other 5 ships in their medical fleet came under attack. The MCS Nightingale took a direct hit to its engine core, sending it spinning out of control. "They're targeting our engines first," Ellie observed grimly. "They want us disabled, not destroyed." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" Rodriguez asked, helping a nurse strap an unconscious patient into an evacuation pod. The ship rocked violently again. This time the shields flickered. "Jenkins, send a final message to Earth Command before we lose comms completely," Ellie ordered. "Tell them the Veridians have opened fire on our medical fleet. 6 ships, over 2,000 medical personnel, and nearly 4,000 patients are under attack." She paused, then added, "And tell them the Veridians deliberately targeted clearly marked medical vessels. Make sure that part is crystal clear." As Jenkins transmitted the message, Ellie didn't know it would change the course of interstellar relations forever. She was too busy trying to save her patients and her crew. The last thing she saw before the bridge erupted in flames was the Veridian flagship moving into position directly above them. Then everything went black. 3 days after the attack on Earth's Medical Corps fleet, representatives from 17 galactic civilizations convened for an emergency session of the Interstellar Diplomatic Assembly. The massive chamber buzzed with whispers and accusations as delegates took their seats. Earth's ambassador Julia Reeves stood calmly at the podium, her silver hair gleaming under the chamber lights, her expression carved from stone. Across from her, the Veridian delegate, Supreme Commander Zith Nar, towered nearly 7 feet tall, his scaled skin shifting from emerald to azure with each agitated breath. "The Veridian Alliance regrets the misunderstanding that led to the unfortunate incident with the Earth vessels," Zith Nar began, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard English. "Our forces believed they were engaging combat ships employing deceptive markings. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Deceptive markings? Ambassador Reeves repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. You mean the internationally recognized symbol for medical services? A symbol that predates space travel on our world by centuries? We have no such convention, Zith Nair replied dismissively. The concept of combat-exempt healing vessels is foreign to our culture. In war, all ships serving the enemy are legitimate targets. The Arcturian delegate raised a tentacle. Supreme Commander, surely you recognize that these vessels were not equipped with weapon systems? They carried advanced technology and personnel valuable to Earth's interests, Zith Nair countered. In Veridian military doctrine, this qualifies them as strategic assets. Ambassador Reeves placed both hands on the podium, leaning forward slightly. Let me make something perfectly clear, Commander. Those strategic assets were doctors, nurses, and critical care technicians. Their mission was to treat the wounded, including any injured Veridians we might encounter. A convenient claim, Zith Nair scoffed. We recovered the bodies of 1,500 medical personnel, Reeves continued, her voice unwavering. And we lost over 2,000 patients who were already wounded or ill, children included. The chamber fell silent. On Earth, for thousands of years across countless conflicts, one principle has remained sacred: medical personnel are non-combatants. Their protection isn't just a nicety, it's the cornerstone of civilized warfare. She looked around the chamber. I'm sure many species represented here have similar conventions. Nods of agreement came from around the room. We call ours the Geneva Conventions, Reeves continued. They establish the rules of war lines that, even in our darkest moments, humanity agrees not to cross. Rules of war? Zith Nair clicked in apparent amusement. War has no rules, Ambassador. Only victors and vanquished. Ambassador Reeves smiled, then a cold, terrible smile that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. That's where you're wrong, Commander. War absolutely has rules. And you've just broken the most important one. She straightened to her full height. You've attacked our healers. You have no idea what you've done. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Zith Nair's scales flashed crimson. It's a history lesson, Reeves replied. Humanity developed these rules for a reason, not out of weakness, but because we learned through centuries of bloodshed what we're capable of when the restraints come off. The assembly chamber grew tense as she continued. Most galactic species have never seen humanity truly at war. We've participated in peacekeeping, in defensive actions, in limited engagements. But we haven't shown you what happens when you force us to unleash everything we've kept contained. And what exactly have you kept contained, Ambassador? Asked the Proximan delegate. Reeves glanced toward the Proximan before addressing the entire assembly. Earth doesn't execute its worst offenders. We contain them, including military geniuses whose strategies were deemed too unethical, too devastatingly effective to ever be implemented. She turned back to Zith Nair. By targeting our medical ships, you've left us no choice but to respond in kind. The Earth Security Council has invoked Directive 47. Several human aides visibly paled. What is this directive? Demanded the Veridian commander. It's the one we hoped we'd never use, Reeves answered quietly. The deployment of our contingency assets. As she returned to her seat, she added almost as an afterthought, the Earth you thought you knew, Commander? You're about to meet the Earth we've been protecting you from. The Neptune maximum security installation hung in orbit, a twisted metal fortress against the blue-black canvas of space. Officially, it housed Earth's most dangerous offenders. Unofficially, it contained individuals whose crimes included knowing too much about how to win a war by any means necessary. Fleet Admiral Thomas Ortega stood ramrod straight as the shuttle docked with the prison station. He'd fought against this decision in 3 separate Security Council meetings before being overruled. Now he was here to release the devil himself. Admiral, we've arrived at processing cell block D, his aide informed him. Ortega nodded grimly. Let's get this over with. The cell at the end of the corridor was different from the others, larger, more heavily fortified. with triple-layered security protocols. The prisoner inside wasn't physically dangerous, his weapons had always been his mind and his words. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Commander Victor Knox sat perfectly still on a simple metal chair, as though he'd been expecting visitors. He was older than his file photos, silver threading through his dark hair, lines carved around his eyes, but just as unnervingly calm as reports suggested. "Admiral Ortega," Knox said, his voice smooth and cultured. "To what do I owe the pleasure of a visit from Fleet Command? Has someone finally realized my strategies for the Proxima campaign were correct?" "The Proxima campaign was resolved peacefully," Ortega replied stiffly. "Yes, with concessions that left Earth vulnerable in 3 sectors. How convenient for anyone planning a future incursion." Knox smiled thinly. "But you're not here to debate old tactical assessments, are you?" Ortega held out a datapad. "The Veridian Alliance has attacked Earth medical ships, resulting in over 3,000 casualties. The Security Council has invoked Directive 47. Knox actually laughed, a sound so genuine it was somehow more disturbing than his calculating smile. "Finally, someone actually did something stupid enough to justify letting me out." He stood, smoothing his prison jumpsuit. "How desperate are we talking? Minor setback? Major casualties? Existential threat?" "The Veridians outgun us 3-1 in capital ships. They've established positions in 7 systems along our border, and intelligence suggests they're preparing for a full-scale invasion." Knox took the datapad, scanning the information with unsettling speed. Interesting physiology. Hierarchical command structure. Rigid adherence to doctrine. He glanced up. "And they attacked medical ships? How perfectly convenient for us." "Convenient?" Ortega couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. "Of course. They've given us the moral high ground while simultaneously proving they don't understand human psychology." Knox handed back the datapad. "Nothing motivates humans like righteous anger, Admiral. Your regular forces would fight harder just knowing what happened, but instead you're unleashing me." He cocked his head. "Which means you're not looking for a conventional victory. You want them broken." Ortega didn't deny it. "The terms of your release are straightforward. You'll be granted temporary command of a special operations vessel and a hand-picked team. Succeed, and your sentence will be commuted to permanent monitored release. Or fail." "I don't fail, Admiral." Knox straightened the collar of his jumpsuit with precise movements. "But I'll need specific personnel, starting with technologist Maya Indira. The woman who weaponized stellar communication arrays? She's on the list. As is covert specialist Dominic Reed, I presume? And Dr. Liang Wei?" Ortega nodded stiffly. "All the war criminals you collaborated with before your capture. How predictable." "Not criminals, Admiral. Visionaries who understood that in war, effectiveness trumps convention." Knox stepped out of his cell for the first time in 15 years. "And I'll need one more specialist, someone not on your list." "Who?" "Mouse." Knox's smile would have chilled polar ice. "The best battlefield surgeon Earth has, preferably one with personal reasons to hate Veridians." Ortega frowned. "You want a medical officer?" "Why?" "Because," Admiral, Knox replied as they walked toward the shuttle bay, "the Veridians broke the rules when they targeted healers. Now we're going to teach them why those rules existed in the first place, and to do that properly, I need someone who understands exactly what they've destroyed." 6 hours later, Operation Prison Break was complete. The Neptune installation had released 7 of Earth's most dangerous strategic minds, all specialists in warfare methods deemed too extreme for conventional military application. As their transport cleared Neptune orbit, Knox stood at the view screen, watching Earth grow smaller. "Inform the Veridians," he said softly, "that we accept their definition of warfare. No rules, no conventions, just victors and vanquished." He turned to his newly assembled team with a predator's smile. "Let's show them what that really means." Dr. Eleanor Frost awoke in a recovery pod aboard an unfamiliar ship. Her first coherent thought was annoyance that someone had put her in a standard-issue medical gown. Her second was wondering why she wasn't dead. "Good morning, doctor," said a smooth, cultured voice. "I'm pleased to see your recovery is proceeding according to schedule." Ellie turned her head to see a tall, distinguished-looking man in a crisp uniform she didn't recognize. No rank insignia, just a small pin bearing a symbol she'd never seen before. "Who the hell are you?" she croaked, her throat raw from smoke inhalation. "Commander Victor Knox, your new commanding officer." Ellie blinked slowly, processing this. "Never heard of you." "And I don't have a commanding officer. Medical Corps is autonomous. Circumstances have changed." Knox handed her a water bulb, which she accepted grudgingly. "You're now the Chief Medical Officer of the ECS Retribution." "The what now?" "That's not a Medical Corps designation. It's not a medical ship." Knox's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's a specialized tactical vessel assembled for a very particular mission." Memories flooded back the attack, the Veridian ships, her crew. Ellie sat bolt upright, ignoring the pain that shot through her chest. "My team, the patients. Most of your medical team perished when the Hippocrates was destroyed," Knox stated with clinical detachment. "A handful survived in escape pods. As for your patients," he paused. "The Veridians were thorough." Ellie felt something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. How many medical ships survived? None. The Veridians disabled and boarded all 6 vessels. They took some prisoners, but most personnel were killed in the initial attack or during boarding actions. She stared at him in stunned silence before asking, "Who are you really?" "Because you're not regular fleet." Knox's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "I'm the solution to a problem, Doctor. The Veridians broke the rules of war, so Earth has decided to respond in kind." A chill ran down Ellie's spine as recognition dawned. "You're from Neptune." Knox inclined his head slightly. "Very good, Doctor. Most people wouldn't make that connection so quickly. Most people haven't taken the mandatory ethics courses required for battlefield medical certification," Ellie retorted. "They make sure we understand exactly what lines cannot be crossed and who crossed them." She narrowed her eyes. "You're the Knox from the Tau Ceti campaign. The one who proposed psychological warfare tactics that violated 17 separate articles of the Geneva Conventions. 18, actually. They added a new article, after my trial specifically to address my strategic innovations. He seemed perversely proud of this. And now Earth needs those innovations." Ellie tried to stand, swayed dangerously, and reluctantly sat back down. "I'm a healer. I don't work with war criminals." "And yet here we are." Knox gestured around the medical bay. "The Veridians didn't distinguish between combatants and medical personnel. They've drawn first blood from people who took oaths to preserve life. Don't you think that deserves a response?" Before Ellie could answer, the door slid open to admit a strikingly diverse group of individuals, none wearing standard fleet uniforms. "Dr. Frost, meet your new colleagues," Knox said smoothly. "Maya Indira, our technology specialist. She once reconfigured a communications array to emit radiation that targeted specific genetic markers." A petite woman with intricate cybernetic implants along her temples nodded curtly. "Dominic Reed, infiltration and psychological operations. He convinced an entire planetary government they were experiencing mass hallucinations." A nondescript man with changeable features smiled disarmingly. "Dr. Liang Wei, xenobiologist. His research into alien biochemistry was deemed too aggressive for ethical publication." An older Asian man with kind eyes and liver-spotted hands gave a small bow. "And our tactical team, Jackson, Nazari, and Quintana, each with their own special talents that made regular military service problematic." 3 hard-eyed individuals regarded her with expressions ranging from curiosity to indifference. Ellie looked from face to face, then back to Knox. "This is insane. You're assembling a team of specialists," Knox interrupted smoothly. "People with unique skills that conventional warfare doesn't utilize. Criminals," Ellie corrected flatly. Only by certain definitions, Knox replied. Definitions that the Veridians don't recognize or respect, which is why we're going to communicate with them in terms they understand. Ellie shook her head vehemently. I'm a doctor. I took an oath to do no harm. And I'm offering you the chance to prevent harm on an unprecedented scale, Knox countered. The Veridians see this attack as the opening move in a larger campaign. Without decisive action, millions will die in the war that follows. So your solution is to what? Commit war crimes? Knox smiled thinly. My solution is to win, Doctor. Quickly, definitively, and with such psychological impact that no species will ever again consider attacking Earth's medical ships. He leaned closer. And to do that, I need someone who understands exactly what the Veridians destroyed when they fired on your fleet. I need someone with your skills, your experience, and your righteous anger. Ellie wanted to refuse. Every ethical principle she held demanded it. But images kept flashing through her mind, her team, her patients, the other 5 ships full of healers and the wounded. What exactly would my role be? She asked cautiously. Knox's smile widened fractionally. Primarily, keeping us alive and functional, but also providing insight into Veridian physiology that might prove tactically valuable. You want me to help you exploit their biological weaknesses. I want you to help me end this conflict before it becomes a war that consumes millions of lives, Knox corrected. Sometimes, Doctor, the crueler path in the short term prevents greater suffering in the long run. Ellie looked around at the assembled team of brilliant misfits and monsters. She had no illusions about what working with them would mean for her career or her conscience. I'll do it, she said finally. But I have conditions. Name them, Knox replied immediately. I determine what medical information I share. I treat all wounded regardless of species. And if I believe you're crossing a line that doesn't need crossing, you listen to my objections. Knox studied her for a long moment before nodding. Agreed, on one condition of my own, you recognize that conventional lines have already been crossed. We're now drawing new ones. As they sealed their unholy alliance with a handshake, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling she'd just made a deal with the devil. But perhaps, she thought grimly, that's exactly what the Veridians deserved. 2 weeks into what Knox had dubbed Operation Hippocratic Consequence, Dr. Eleanor Frost found herself standing in the Retribution strategy room, but staring at holographic displays of Veridian physiology with growing disbelief. This can't possibly be legal, she muttered, watching as Knox and Maya Indira calibrated a device that would exploit the peculiar sensitivity of Veridian auditory structures. Technically, Knox replied without looking up, it doesn't violate any specific provision of interstellar law. The frequency disruptor creates sound waves that are merely uncomfortable to Veridians, not permanently damaging. Uncomfortable? Ellie raised an eyebrow. According to my analysis, it would be comparable to someone scraping metal against your molars while simultaneously blasting an air horn next to your ear. Precisely. Uncomfortable, not lethal. Knox adjusted a setting, and far more humane than their tactics. The past 2 weeks had been a crash course in Knox's method of warfare. The Retribution had systematically dismantled Veridian operations across 3 systems using strategies that left Ellie both horrified and reluctantly impressed. In the Tau Virginie system, they'd infiltrated the Veridian command vessel and replaced standard lighting with a spectrum that triggered the defensive nictitating membrane in Veridian eyes, essentially blinding the command crew without causing actual damage. While the Veridians fumbled in what was, to them, blinding light, Knox's team had disabled their weapons systems and navigation. At Procyon Outpost, they'd introduced a synthetic compound into the air filtration that mimicked the pheromones of Veridian prey animals. The entire garrison had been overwhelmed by instinctive hunting behaviors, breaking formation and internal command structures. Now they were preparing to take on the Veridian fleet headquarters at Sirius Junction. Doctor, what can you tell me about Veridian reproductive customs? Knox asked suddenly. Ellie blinked at the abrupt change of subject. Excuse me? Their cultural taboos surrounding reproduction. Dr. Wei's xenoanthropological analysis suggests they have extremely rigid protocols. Yes, Ellie said cautiously. Veridians have 3 biological sexes, all required for reproduction. The process is considered sacred and surrounded by elaborate ritual. Knox's eyes gleamed in that way Ellie had come to recognize as dangerous. And their equivalent of obscenity would be? Discussing reproduction outside of sanctioned contexts, Ellie replied, then narrowed her eyes. Why? Why? Dominic, Knox called to Reed, who was working at another console. How close are you to cracking their communication protocols? About 85% there, Reed replied. I can access most of their channels, but controlled transmission is still spotty. Prioritize their public announcement systems, Knox ordered. Ellie suddenly understood. You're going to broadcast reproductive information across their command frequencies. Not just information, Knox corrected. Misinformation. Cultural taboos are powerful psychological weapons, Doctor. If we can make their troops believe they're being exposed to reproductive blasphemy, it will create chaos. That's actually brilliant, Ellie admitted reluctantly. And technically not harmful. You're beginning to understand how I operate, Knox said with satisfaction. Maximum psychological impact, minimum physical damage. The Veridians expect us to fight like conventional warriors, ship to ship, weapon to weapon. They don't expect us to target their cultural foundations. Over the next 3 days, Knox's unconventional strategies continued to baffle and demoralize the Veridian forces. They introduced false intelligence suggesting that Earth had developed technology to identify and target the Veridian equivalent of their reproductive caste, a lie. But one that caused the Veridians to divert significant resources to protecting members of that caste who weren't even present in the battle group. Using Dr. Wei's research on Veridian biology, they deployed nanodrones that emitted frequencies matching Veridian distress calls, causing confusion and triggering protective responses that disrupted military operations. Maya Indira reprogrammed Veridian navigation systems to display error messages in their sacred script, effectively making their own technology blaspheme against their beliefs. And through it all, Ellie found herself becoming an integral part of the strategy sessions. Her medical knowledge providing insights that Knox's team weaponized in increasingly creative ways. You're enjoying this, Knox observed one evening, finding her still working in the medical lab. Ellie looked up sharply. I wouldn't call it enjoyment. Satisfaction, then. The application of your knowledge to achieve justice. Is that what we're doing? Achieving justice? She set down her tablet. Or are we just finding more sophisticated ways to terrorize an enemy? Knox considered her question seriously. Both, perhaps. But consider this. We've disabled 17 Veridian vessels, disrupted their command structure across 3 systems, and forced the withdrawal of their forces from Earth's border territories, all without killing a single Veridian soldier. Ellie hadn't realized that last part. None? You're certain? Confirmed by Dr. Wei's monitoring of their communication channels. They report multiple psychological casualties, numerous systems failures, and widespread morale degradation. But 0 deaths. Something shifted in Ellie's perception of their mission. You've been deliberately avoiding lethal tactics. Of course, Knox seemed surprised she hadn't noticed. Lethal force is easy, Doctor. Any military commander can order a barrage that kills thousands, creating victory conditions without massacre that requires genuine strategic innovation. But you file your war crimes. We're about methods deemed psychologically cruel, not body count. Knox finished for her. I've never advocated unnecessary killing. I simply recognize that the mind is a more vulnerable target than the body. Ellie stared at him, reassessing everything she thought she knew about the infamous Commander Knox. You're not what I expected. Few of us from Neptune are, he replied. We weren't imprisoned for being bloodthirsty, Doctor. We were imprisoned because our methods were too effective and too disturbing to a civilization that prefers its warfare to look clean and conventional on paper, but even when the death toll mounts. Before Ellie could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Commander Maya Indira's voice came over the comm. The Veridian High Command has requested communication. They're asking for terms. Knox's eyes met Ellie's. It seems our unconventional approach has made an impression. He started toward the door, then paused. Join me on the bridge, Doctor. I think you've earned the right to witness their surrender. As she followed him, Ellie realized that her understanding of warfare and of Knox himself had undergone a fundamental shift. These criminals, these outcasts, had accomplished what conventional forces could not. And they had done it without adding to the death toll that had begun with the attack on her medical fleet. Perhaps, she thought, there was something to be said for unconventional warfare after all. The bridge of the ECS Retribution hummed with tense energy as the Veridian Supreme Commander's image appeared on the main view screen. Zithner's scales had lost their lustrous sheen, shifting between dull gray and sickly yellow signs of extreme stress, according to Dr. Way's briefing. Commander Knox, the Veridian began, his translator struggling to mask the strain in his voice. The Veridian Alliance formally requests cessation of your current campaign against our forces. Knox, seated calmly in the command chair, merely raised an eyebrow. Cessation? Not terms of surrender? Zithner's neck frills flattened a sign of agitation. We are prepared to discuss mutual withdrawal from contested territories. I don't think you understand your position, Commander, Knox replied mildly. Let me clarify it for you. In the past 3 standard weeks, we have systematically dismantled your command structure, rendered your most advanced weapons systems inoperable, and inserted enough misinformation into your intelligence networks that your analysts can no longer distinguish fact from fiction. He leaned forward slightly. And we've done all this with a single ship and a crew of 9. The Veridian commander's scales rippled with disbelief. Or impossible. Our reports indicate coordinated attacks across multiple systems. Yes, Knox smiled thinly. Sophisticated deception is rather our specialty. Dr. Frost, standing at Knox's right shoulder, watched the Veridian's reaction with professional interest. His nictitating membranes were flickering rapidly, a stress response she'd documented in her research. If I may, she said, stepping forward. Knox nodded his permission. Supreme Commander, I'm Dr. Eleanor Frost, formerly Chief Medical Officer of the EMCS Hippocrates, one of the medical ships your forces destroyed. Recognition flickered across the alien's features. The human healer. Our intelligence indicated you perished. Nearly, Ellie confirmed. I survived to witness something remarkable. A human military response that deliberately prioritized non-lethal tactics, despite your attack on non-combatants. Knox picked up the thread smoothly. Your forces have suffered 0 casualties during our campaign, Commander. A courtesy you did not extend to our medical personnel. Zithner's translator couldn't fully convey the complex series of clicks and whistles he emitted, but the meaning became clear. If this is true, if you have such capability and yet restrained from lethal force, then why? And to what purpose? Knox exchanged a glance with Ellie before answering. It's to demonstrate the depth of your miscalculation. You attacked medical ships because you believed all vessels serving enemy interests are legitimate targets. We responded by showing you exactly what real human military assets are capable of without even firing a single conventional weapon. Dominic Reed, monitoring Veridian communications at his station, suddenly straightened. Commander, they've just received intelligence from their homeworld. The Supreme Council is in disarray. Knox nodded as if he'd expected this. Your leadership has finally realized what you're facing, Commander. They've accessed your military archives and discovered exactly who was released to deal with your attack. On screen, Zithner seemed to physically diminish. The humans we have been fighting, who are you? We, Knox replied with dangerous simplicity, are what Earth keeps locked away. The strategies deemed too extreme, the minds considered too dangerous for conventional warfare. He stood, approaching the view screen. I am Commander Victor Knox. Until 3 weeks ago, I was imprisoned in Neptune maximum security installation for war crimes committed during the Tau Ceti campaign. My crew consists entirely of individuals similarly confined for methods deemed excessively effective. The revelation sent visible shock through the Veridian commander. Earth deployed war criminals against us? Earth released specialists to respond to your violation of medical neutrality, Knox corrected. And now you face a choice: unconditional surrender, or I remove the ethical constraints I've been operating under. Dr. Wei spoke up from his station. Commander, Veridian communication channels are experiencing a 347% increase in traffic. Their entire command structure appears to be conferring simultaneously. They're panicking, Reed translated with professional satisfaction. Ellie stepped closer to the view screen. Supreme Commander, as a medical officer, I feel obligated to inform you that what you've experienced so far has been the equivalent of a diagnostic test. Commander Knox has been identifying your vulnerabilities without exploiting them to their full potential. A courtesy that ends in 30 minutes, Knox added, unless we receive your unconditional surrender. The Veridian commander's scales had settled into a uniform gray resignation, according to Wei's cultural notes. How do we know this is not another deception? Zith Nair asked. One ship causing such disruption defies tactical logic. Knox smiled that cold, precise smile that still sent chills down Ellie's spine. Allow me to introduce my team properly. He gestured to each crew member in turn, listing their specialties and the reasons for their imprisonment. With each introduction, the Veridian commander's posture sank further. And finally, Knox concluded, I should mention that Earth's actual military forces remain undeployed. What you faced is merely a special task force, a handful of individuals deemed too dangerous to serve in regular military operations. The silence that followed was profound. When Zith Nair spoke again, his translator couldn't fully mask the tremor in his voice. The Veridian Alliance surrenders unconditionally. We request immediate cessation of all psychological operations against our forces. Knox nodded once, the gesture both acknowledgement and dismissal. Transmit the formal articles of surrender within the hour. Dr. Frost will provide coordinates for the return of all medical personnel taken prisoner during your initial attack. When the communication ended, the bridge remained silent for several moments before erupting into controlled celebration. Ellie found herself accepting congratulations from people she had once considered monsters. A remarkable victory, Dr. Knox said quietly, joining her at the view screen where she stood watching the Veridian flagship power down its systems. Made possible, in no small part, by your contributions. I'm not sure how to feel about that, Ellie admitted. Using medical knowledge as a weapon goes against everything I was trained for. And yet, Knox observed, you used it to save lives both human and Veridian. Sometimes the healer's path and the warrior's path run parallel. 3 days later, the Retribution docked at Earth Central Station to a reception notably lacking in fanfare. Admiral Ortega met them in a private docking bay, his expression carefully neutral as he reviewed the terms of the Veridian surrender. Impressive work, he finally acknowledged. The Veridians have not only withdrawn from all contested territories but have also proposed a formal adoption of Earth's medical neutrality protocols for all future conflicts. He glanced at Ellie. Apparently, Dr. Frost made quite an impression during the surrender negotiations. Knox inclined his head slightly. The doctor helped them understand the value of healing arts and the consequences of targeting healers. As the crew prepared to disembark, Maya Indira caught Ellie's attention. The Veridians have been spreading some interesting rumors through interstellar channels, she said with a hint of amusement. According to our monitoring, they're warning other species to never attack humans' medical ships. Why? Ellie asked, though she suspected the answer. Reed joined them, his features settling into his natural configuration as he quoted, You don't want to see what the humans keep locked away, Reed quoted with a satisfied smirk. Their healers are sacred for a reason. They keep something far worse contained. Ellie felt a chill run through her at the words. The Veridians had learned their lesson, but at what cost to her own principles. In effective psychological warfare, Knox commented, joining their conversation, fear is a powerful deterrent. Sometimes creating the right kind of fear prevents the need for actual violence. Is that how you justify what we did? Ellie asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Knox considered her for a moment. I don't justify it, Doctor. I simply acknowledge its effectiveness. Your presence on this mission wasn't just for your medical expertise, it was to provide the moral compass this crew needed. Admiral Ortega cleared his throat. Speaking of which, the review board is ready to discuss your status, Commander Knox, and the status of your entire crew. The mood shifted instantly. Despite their victory, the reality of their situation reasserted itself. They were still convicted criminals in the eyes of Earth Command. Dr. Frost, Ortega continued, your testimony will be particularly valuable. As the only crew member not previously incarcerated, your perspective on their methods and restraint will factor heavily in the board's decision. Ellie looked around at the faces of these people, individuals she had once feared and now fought alongside. People who had protected her, and in their own way honored her medical oath by finding a way to end a conflict without bloodshed. I understand, Admiral, she said. I'll be sure they hear exactly what happened out there. Later, as they walked toward the station's secure conference room, Knox fell into step beside her. Whatever you decide to tell them, he said quietly, know that what we accomplished was no small thing. We prevented a war that would have cost millions of lives. By convincing an entire species that humans are too dangerous to provoke, Ellie countered. Knox's expression remained unreadable. Sometimes the most effective medicine tastes bitter, Doctor. Isn't that what you told me when you reset my shoulder after the Veridian boarding attempt? Ellie couldn't help but smile slightly. Using my own words against me is hardly fair play, Commander. Fair play is for games, Knox replied, and this was never a game. As they approached the review board chamber, Ellie made her decision. These people, damaged, dangerous, and undeniably effective, had found a way to wage war without killing. In a universe of escalating conflicts, perhaps that was exactly what humanity needed, the precise application of fear rather than force. Commander, she said, pausing before they entered, about my testimony. Knox waited, his eyes meeting hers with that same calculating intelligence she had come to recognize. I think Earth Command needs to understand exactly what kind of checkmate you delivered out there, she finished. The kind that saves lives on both sides. For the first time since she'd met him, Victor Knox smiled, not the cold, tactical smile he used as a weapon, but something genuine that transformed his severe features. Then I believe we understand each other, Doctor, he said, opening the door to face whatever judgment awaited them both.